going to tell you a story, and it's not going to be neat or easy to follow. It's going to take 10 parts, and you're going to need to pay attention. Did I say that already? Oh, and there may be a hint of a cycle. Welcome to the Aurora Wasteland Lifecycle. Episode 10. Sometimes it's just a coffee, and sometimes it's dick. I think I've stumbled across something big, something I need to tell the world about. I'm not sure how to do so because I don't know if I fully understand it. It's bigger than everything, so I'm going to need you to pay attention, read between the lines, and come up with your own conclusions because I'm not going to lay it out for you. I've discovered 10 posts in the Aurora Wasteland that when laid together tell a story. A story that is going to change the world. So pay attention. I think I said that already. But it's true. Pay attention and think. Think outside the box. As well, you'll see. Maybe. Archived Aurora Wasteland post number 10. Post submitted to the Aurora Wasteland website by the organizer of these 10 posts. You made it. This is the end. The 9 posts before this laid the groundwork for what I'm about to tell you. If you're still here, thank you. The world needs to know this. You need to know this because if we don't do something now, it's going to be too late. I gathered these posts to lay the groundwork for my story. Are you ready? Because things are about to get, well, for lack of a more accurate term, weird. My name is Holden. I've talked to the website admins. They are allowing me to use my real name because of the position I hold. We'll get to just what that is later. But before all this started, before I stumbled across what was happening, I worked for the government. I had this theory. From what I could tell on the outside of the government, elected officials seem to always be out of touch of the reality of the common people. Moreover, they seem to be, and I'm putting it nicely here, dumbass shitheads who have shockingly bad decision-making track records. Right, my theory. I thought if I could get a job working for the government, I could change things on the inside. Boy, was I wrong. It just gave me a front row seat to their dumbassness. But that's all besides the point. I was a government analyst, a boring-ass job doing paperwork. Work became more and more of a dread. I hated it clean and simple. That is, until a paper came across my desk, an application to have one of the parks turned into an Aurora Wasteland observation area, whatever that meant. I'd never seen an application like this before, and the more I asked around, the more it became clear that this wasn't meant for our department. But at the same time, nobody could tell me what department it was meant for. I searched the internet, file shares, both in the cloud and not, emails everywhere. The only reference I could find to the Aurora Wasteland was an old reference inside an archived and previous version of a meeting's minutes from years before. It seemed almost like the references to the Aurora Wasteland were scrubbed from, well, everywhere, and that this little mention accidentally survived by sheer luck. The meeting minutes referenced something called the offline Rubicon storage building in relation to the Aurora Wasteland, so I set out to find it. This is the point of the story where I hit my first montage. It took me years to find out exactly what and where it was. Instead of sending a newsletter blast out to the entire government office, I decided to keep it quiet. The Aurora Wasteland seemed to have been scrubbed from everything, and that was likely for a reason. Instead, I focused on the Rubicon offline storage building. Slowly, I asked people from different departments, but only after gaining their trust. Eventually, I had an anonymous email sent to me, which I know what you're thinking. Email can't be sent anonymously, dummy. Just check the from line. But I did, and it was blank. I wanted to ask the IT department, but I didn't know anyone there well enough yet. I know now who sent it to me, but we'll get to that later. I'm sure you're dying to know what the email said. I wish I had some grand, top-secret, world-changing message to share with you, but I don't. All I received was a pair of GPS coordinates. I know, super exciting. Part of me thought it was just spam. The other part of me thought it was just someone out to fuck with me. Maybe I'd poorly gauged my friendship with a few people, but I grabbed my phone, pulled up the GPS app, and then went on a hike to find it. My search didn't take long. Like I said, I work for the government. I don't get to work at the actual legislative building, but I do work across the street from it. As I walked out of my building, I realized just how close the coordinates were. They were directing me to the legislative building we here in Alberta call the Ledge. I have no idea why, other than the word just being a shorter version of it. Makes me think of a cliff. Maybe they just used to push a lot of politicians off cliffs. I have no idea. As I crossed through the courtyard, which was dead quiet, to go to the ledge, I grabbed a coffee from a vendor's cart. Even truth seekers need caffeine. It's what keeps us going. I'd hate to think of what the world would become without it. Coffee in hand, I rushed the rest of the way over, following the GPS coordinates, and making small adjustments to my course as I went. I entered the ledge. Luckily for me, my security pass got me in. The coordinates led me to the largest room in the building. It was the location where the elected government officials gather to publicly declare their lies and hide their true motivations, aka create laws that benefit themselves. I made my way down one of the aisles to the center of the room. I stared at the GPS coordinates on my phone. They matched the ones sent to me. As I stood there, I became more and more certain someone was going to just jump out and gleam with excitement that they got me, but no one did. Why had someone sent me these coordinates? There was nothing here to see. Certainly nothing about the offline Rubicon storage building. I saw no files of any kind. The room was empty. Coffee in hand, I wondered what to do now. The longer I stayed there, the more I felt like an idiot. Eventually, my frustration bubbled over and I took a single step to leave. It took one more single step for me to figure out where I really needed to be. I bent down and ran my fingers along a hatch in the floor. I remember hearing rumors of a tunnel being created decades ago so that elected officials could take them out when the public eventually revolted against them. I pried up the corner and lifted the heavy square hatch cover out of the way. Darkness stared up at me. I switched my phone to flashlight mode. I could see the floor below me. It wasn't far. In fact, I'd probably have to crouch to move once I got down there. There was zero chance I wasn't going down. I took a long, caffeine-filled chug of my now room temperature coffee for the first time, placed it next to the hatch and dropped down into it, leaving my coffee behind. The air felt thick with dust, almost like I was on another planet. I could feel it on my tongue, coating my throat and lungs. I coughed a few times as I spun my flashlight around the room. There was row after row of shelves, floor-to-ceiling shelves that would put your favorite big box store to shame. They must have gone on in each direction for at least the length of a hockey rink. It was impossible to see the end with only my phone as a light. The entire area looked like a maze. Shelves seemed to be placed randomly, as if they were added as needed with no plan for the next. Here's the thing. Every single shelf was empty. A thick coating of dust was all they were supporting. Well, except one. A single box sat on a shelf. Slowly I approached it and blew the dust off the top. There, written in an aged permanent marker, was offline Rubicon storage. I laughed. It was real. The message I'd received wasn't fake. I pulled the box from the shelf and took the top off. There, sitting inside, was what looked like a video game system, one I'd never seen before. And while the bulk of my video game playing time was behind me, I still kept up on current systems. The thing I was staring at wasn't one of them. I ran my fingers along the top. It was clean, likely the cleanest thing in the room. As I reached into the box and pulled it out, I heard a voice above me. People were starting to arrive at the ledge for work. I needed to get out of there. Examining it would be difficult, and I'm not sure I could, but I put the lid on the box, tucked the box under my arm, and climbed back out of the hatch, knocking my coffee over in the process. I rushed out of the room and out of the building, box in tow. After spending even the smallest amount of time down in the dark storage area, my eyes hurt as the light from the outside world hit them. Free from the building, I placed the box on the grass and sat down next to it. I stared at the strange-looking video game system and wondered what it had on it. What I learned blew my mind. It was hard to believe what I was reading. There were decades and decades of old accounts of people encountering strange and weird phenomena. Most of it was backed up by pictures and police reports, but everything was given a status of unfit for public consumption. There were multiple letters written to the government officials pleading to get the information out to the common folks. They each received replies saying it would negatively affect voter turnout. It seemed like there used to be a government team, Rubicon, I believe, that used to investigate the events, but they were shut down. All the newer information seemed to be from a website called AuroraWasteland.com. That was the name on the application that started all of this. I spent hours going through it all until I fell asleep with my face on the game system. I woke up the next morning early, choking on my own drool, to book a meeting with my boss. He had to see this. The world had to see this, to learn about it. I had to succeed where previous attempts to get this information out had failed. On my way to the meeting, I stopped to grab another coffee. I badly needed the caffeine and normalcy after the day before. The building was quiet as I got to the meeting room. I scheduled it early, but still expected to see a few people on the way. The game system tucked under my arm and coffee in hand, I pushed the door to the meeting room open, with my elbow, only to see someone who definitely wasn't my boss. First, my boss was a woman. This was a man. Second, my boss was also part of the coffee cult, maybe even more so than myself, and this man had a T. Plus, he just looked awkward in his suit, like he was still growing into it. I apologized that I must be in the wrong room, even though I knew I wasn't. He told me that I was in the right place, and that I was to sit down. I took another sip of coffee and obliged him. Before I could open my mouth to speak, the man told me I was going to be let go, that I'd done nothing wrong, but due to reorganization, I wasn't needed anymore. He apologized and admitted that this could be a difficult time. I told him that he must have the wrong person, and I was there to explain what I'd found. The man sighed and then commenced telling me he heard all the excuses before, but he reassured me that I was the correct person, or I wouldn't be here now. Then, without hesitation or notice, the man smiled, pulled a gun from his pocket, and blew a hole in his chest. The man who claimed to be my boss collapsed back into one of the meeting chairs. He placed the gun on the table and slid it over to me. He smiled again and told me it was my turn. Then he exhaled his final breath. I stared at the gun. He wanted me to kill myself for being fired? That seemed extreme. This all seemed impossible. With the game console still tucked under my arm, I turned to run. I fumbled for the knob as I glanced back over my shoulder at the man. The hole in his chest didn't bleed red. Instead, it was black. Or at least I think it was. Honestly, the whole thing seemed like such a blur. It's funny how the human brain works. Sometimes it seems to be failing us, when in reality it's working exactly as it's intended to keep us safe, to protect us from things we aren't suited to handle. As I left the building, I was in a fog. My brain was obviously processing more information than I was privy to. My normal senses all seemed diminished. I barely felt like myself. The rising morning sun felt reassuring on my face as I peeked over the horizon. Had I really just been fired? Had the man really just blown a hole in his chest, then expected me to do the same? This had all been related to the Aurora Wasteland and the video game console under my arm. I felt like everything was bubbling up. It was overwhelming. My brain was overheating. I was going to pop. Then the strangest thing happened. The barista from the cart I'd got my coffee from yesterday and today was standing in front of me, coffee in hand. She was holding it out for me like I just ordered it. I asked if she was real. She replied, "Is anyone real?" I took the coffee and smiled. There was a sense of relief and comfort in it. I took a long, slow drink. The coffee tasted off. I asked her what kind it was. She told me she was sorry, that I was being followed, and that the only way to get me to safety was to up the dosage she'd given me, now that she knew how it worked for me. Confused, I asked what she meant. She laughed and told me I'd see soon enough. She took the console from under my arm and said she'd give it back when we met again. I reached out to take it back, but stumbled and fell to the ground, spilling my coffee. When I looked up, the barista was gone, though she wasn't the only thing. The sky was dark, thick with gray clouds blocked out the sun. The buildings around me looked the same, but different. They all looked abandoned and all neglected. I spun around, taking it all in. The rest of the city looked the same. It was dark, not a light to be seen. Well, except for the building I didn't recognize. It stretched almost to the clouds and seemed to be the only building with any activity in it. It was massive. Everything seemed to have a blue glow to it, almost like the sun was sending out blue light. Not whatever the normal sun puts out. I'm not sure what that is. Even the air felt different as I breathed it in, heavier somehow. Then I heard it. A gunshot, or something similar, whatever it was. Something pierced through my arm, tearing through my tricep. I looked down to see my own blood splatter across the ground. Then there was another at the same time. I heard it go past my head. I had no idea what was happening or where I was, so I ran. Holding my arm, I sprinted from work and away from the building I didn't recognize. I heard people moving around. The streets were quiet, no cars, no noise except for the sounds of something following me. I never saw them. My vision blurred as I ran and became almost tunnel-like. I thought of very little as I ran. The same thoughts kept recycling in my head over and over. The coffee must have been drugged. The barista had said something about dosage. What did she give me? Was he just having a hard reaction to whatever it was? She said I was being followed. It seemed like despite whatever she'd done, I was still being followed. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. I collapsed back down on a park bench, panting and exhausted. I checked my arm over. It was bleeding a lot, but seemed okay otherwise. Though what do I know? I'm not a doctor. I could hear the movement still around me. They were getting closer, whoever they were. They'd find me soon, and then what? I rubbed my eyes. I was exhausted from the night before. Then, like someone turning the volume on the world up, I opened my eyes to find everything was back to normal. The light, the clouds, everything. I exhaled in relief, then noticed the woman sitting next to me. It was the barista. How had she known I would be here? She introduced herself as Angie. She said I needed to tell people about what I'd read and experienced, and most importantly, I needed to do it in a way everyone would listen. So I am. Today, I am standing here in front of all of you. My staff will provide everything we have regarding my story, and the other stories I've provided you. I need you to see it, the story. I need you to remember everything because you're going to need to. I can't lay it out for you because I'm not sure I understand it. Still, the message, the idea, is big and well, you'll see. The world will never be the same for any of us. You elected me to bring science and knowledge about the events in our lives we can't easily classify or quantify. You elected me to bring you the truth. My name is Holden, elected government official now in charge of the division formerly known as Rubicon, and I'd like to formally welcome all of you to the Aurora Wasteland. Hey, my name is Vaughn Ashby. I wrote this. If you liked what you heard, head on over to VaughnAshby.com/free and pick up a free novel or a bunch of other free stuff. Go explore the Aurora Wasteland yourself at AuroraWasteland.com. Don't forget to check out the Stories from the Wasteland podcast and search for Vaughn Ashby on YouTube for video versions and other exciting videos. Thanks for listening.